Hey everybody, this is Blake here. Heads up, I'm losing my voice, so this is probably going to be one of my shortest reviews of all time. Um, Watched Lone Survivor. I originally actually wasn't planning on seeing it during its theatrical run. When I saw the trailer, I thought everything about it looked solid, but I'm not really all that interested in seeing Peter Berg movies. Peter Berg is not a bad director. Everything he's done has been solid to some extent. Hancock, The Rundown, Friday Night Lights. Shit, what else has he even done? The Kingdom. All of them are decent movies, but they all had so much potential to be great, and they just weren't. So believe it or not, I'm probably the only person who dreaded Peter Berg's involvement that wasn't thinking about Battleship at that same time. And Battleship was very, very bad, but much like Joel Schumacher, I don't think that automatically means Peter Berg is a shitty director. It just means he did a shitty job on that movie. I really don't get why people get so hung up over Batman and Robin when Joel Schumacher has done plenty of other films, many of which are exceptional movies, which Peter Berg has really yet to make. So I just figured that Lone Survivor would be the same kind of film. It would be, a solid movie, certainly worth watching, but it would not reach its full potential, which it probably would have been able to if a better director was at the helm. And then, much to my surprise, I actually ended up really liking this movie. It's it's going to probably be a contender for at least my top 10 list of favorite movies of 2014. And obviously, it depends on what else comes out, and it's not going to be really probably in the top 5 unless this year sucked as much as 2013 did. It was an exceptional film. The first one Peter Berg has done. Well, why is it exceptional? Well, I'll discuss that, I guess. Well, first off, my biggest concern was that the suspense would be diminished because I knew how it was going to end. Now, I knew nothing about the real actual story. My cat's making noise, and I'm afraid he's going to interrupt filming. Now he's playing with a bottle cap. Bad kitty. Go away. um, uh, because the title Lone Survivor and the fact that if you see the poster you see Mark Wahlberg's face, that kind of tells you how this movie is going to conclude. That was my main concern, but luckily it overcame that problem. Now this did lead to some flaws in itself, though. I saw this with my dad, and we both agreed that the weakest point of the film was the first act. He thought it just went on for too long. He wanted to get to the heavier stuff much sooner. I disagree. For me, the actors portraying the characters were so entertaining, and they had so many funny lines and interesting personalities and good chemistry that I honestly enjoyed all of their interactions. So I did not mind the length of the first act because it entertained me in its own way. But I did feel that the cliches were a bit too heavy when it came to their backstories. One guy is getting married, another guy, his girlfriend might be pregnant, even though it's kind of ambiguous. Another guy, he's bonding with his girlfriend. Now, the problem with this criticism is I don't know if that's how the actual people, or if that was stuff the actual people were going through at that time. Maybe this film is so historically accurate that it's shocking how real life can in many ways be a cesspool of cliches, but I do not know that. I could only say based on my experience watching this film. It's almost like the film was rubbing it in that these guys are all probably going to die by the end of the movie, because these are all backstories that you give to victims so you feel that much more sad when they do bite the dust, even though it's been done so many times that honestly whenever I watch it happen, I don't care. But this film at least once again overcame that, and that when people did start dying, I did care. That's how well this movie at least executed its cliches. Now the first act is just all build up. You get to know these people, the mission and stuff like that. The second act I'm going to divide in half. The first half of the second act, it's very low-key and suspenseful. Characters have to deal with frighteningly morally ambiguous dilemmas in which villagers stumble onto their hiding spot, so they have to decide whether they let them go and abandon the mission, which is what protocol I believe would demand. But at the same time, they're letting this guy who get away, and this guy who they're supposed to assassinate, he will kill a lot of people. So anybody he kills afterwards, their blood is almost on our protagonist's hands. Or they can kill off these villagers who might be innocent, they might not be. There's speculation that they are Taliban, but you're not really sure at that time. But then, they're getting their hands dirty in a totally different kind of way. So the characters bicker and they discuss what they should do about that. And, it makes you ask, what would you do in that situation? I honestly don't know. And so that led to many suspenseful interactions and, close calls, and I was into it in a totally different kind of way. It's like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen next? And then the second half of the second act is almost purely action-based, as these guys are assaulted on almost all ends. You have villains attacking from the front, from the sides, from the other side, and the back is the only place they could really move, except the terrain is really working against them. It's all very steep hills that if they can't just climb down, they have to pretty much roll down, and now they're breaking bones and getting injured because they're falling against rocks and trees. And so it's very claustrophobic in that kind of sense. Even though these guys are obviously really trained, and you could see that just how they react to these situations, and they have the better equipment and the more skill than all these Taliban guys, but since they have so much more numbers and more of a mastery of the terrain than these protagonists do, you really do feel that it's in many ways an even fight. Usually in films like this, they either make the soldiers, the good guys, too incompetent other than the main character, which this film thankfully does not do, or they make the villains too easy to overcome. Whereas this one, I honestly kept thinking of The Raid, where it does really feel like it's the good guys have more skill, but it's not enough to overcome sheer numbers. And what made the action so intense is how they keep getting injured. Now, usually when characters get shot in war films, they're either going to die, it's a mortal wound, so they could have the dramatic death speech before they pass away, or they get wounded, and that wound somehow affects the story. They're slowing everybody down, and so on. Well, this film is not like that. When somebody gets shot, it's usually very painful looking, like you can't help but flinch and cringe, but at the same time, it's not enough of a wound to where it stops their momentum. They still have to fight. They still have to keep moving. And something about that just made everything they do that much more painful to watch. It makes you really feel bad for these characters. And it's not just them getting shot, too. They're also, having to, like I said, roll down these hills filled with rocks. So they're constantly just getting beaten up from that. Once the villains start dishing out, I believe, just like, I don't know what the actual gun is called. It's an explosive weapon. I have no idea what kind of gun is which. I'm really bad in that subject, but it's like somebody had a rocket launcher of some sort, and it would never get a direct hit on the good guys, but always be close enough to where like pieces of rock would fly into them, and even that started to look really painful. So it was just incredibly intense. At times very difficult to watch, but for all the right reasons. And the action scenes in general were just really well shot and edited. I could always make out who was who and what was going on. And that was kind of surprising because the characters all kind of look alike. They all have the same sort of facial hair, and at times you'd think that would really throw me off as to who is who, but I never had any problem with that. So it wasn't just that the action was very intense, it was also very exciting and even entertaining, while never undermining the brutality of the situation, how uncomfortable it is. The trailers really compared this to Saving Private Ryan, which I disagree with. Saving Private Ryan, for one, I thought was a lot better, and I thought there were a lot more great movies following Saving Private Ryan, so I don't think it's the best war movie since then. But Saving Private Ryan was much more of an adventure war film. These guys are pretty much going on this journey to find this character, and they experience many different things in the process. This film is the total opposite. These guys are stuck within a small area. They're trapped. It's very claustrophobic, and it's just them trying to survive. It's more heavy on almost how futile their situation is. And the film so ingeniously plays to our emotions. There's so many hope spots that they trick you into thinking that it's going to finally end, and it's going to end well for the guys. I forgot that the film was called Lone Survivor and presumed that, that more people could actually get away, but then the film just cruelly rips that hope spot away from us. And just to show how powerful this movie was, its effect on its audience, like everybody in my theater groaned and cried out in distress. It was great. This is the type of movie that at first I was concerned because a lot of people were talking around me, but in the end, the experience was great because everybody was just mesmerized at what was going on screen. Whenever somebody would get hurt, they'd yell out and cringe, and like, oh shit, that hurt, and and so on. And at the very end, everybody clapped. That's always a nice experience too. Well, in the third act, it seems like there's a break from the action, but in the third act is once again another major action sequence that's also very intense. And I actually liked where the story went too. It seems like you don't usually get the other side of the Afghans in films. Either they're sheep who have to be protected by the American soldiers, or they're the villains. Especially now, they're usually portrayed as the villains. Well, this one is very intent on making a point that the Taliban does not represent every Afghan, and there are some good guy Afghan characters who actually turn out to be just as badass, and I really liked that. That really got to me too. And once again, I didn't know the real story, so I had no idea where it was going when it came to that subplot. So, all in all, I was really happy with Lone Survivor. It's probably going to be in my top 10 favorite movies of 2014, which is funny considering it was released the same week as The Legend of Hercules, which will be in my top 10 worst films of 2014. So yeah, I'd say definitely check this one out. Hey, this review ended up being longer than I thought it would be. I think I handled that pretty well. But let me know what you guys think. Did you see the movie? Did you agree with my opinions? Or are you interested in seeing it at all? Maybe it's just not your cup of tea. Let me know what you feel. Also, I'll just talk about... I did not do a written review for this movie. I did do a written review for Tai Chi Hero, which is a sequel to Tai Chi Zero, so check that one out. And of course, The Legend of Hercules. And I did my top 10 the top 10 movies I liked the most of 2013, and the top whatever movies I disliked the most of 2013. Also, March is coming up, and March is the month of my birthday, and I always like to have a movie marathon where I discuss a franchise or do written reviews of a franchise I've never either seen or never finished, and I'm interested in getting into. So I have a poll I'm going to link in the description. Please, please, please vote there. The options are Howling, Puppet Master, Children of the Corn, what was it? Best of the Best, the Dragon Ball Z animated movies, which oddly is probably going to be what wins, even though it's probably the one I'm the least interested in. But vote for what you want. I'm cool either way. And then American Ninja. So please vote. I'd really appreciate it. And follow me on Twitter. Check out my website and all that noise. I'll stop wasting your time now because I have to go play with my cat a bit. Oh, you look so cute. So bye. Oh, here's the kitty, by the way. Oh, look at that kitty. Meow.